Hello and a warm welcome to our very first episode of The Wellness Edge, a podcast series, and this is number one in the series, and absolutely delighted to be joined by a truly accomplished gentleman in Professor Matt House. Professor Matt House and I go back a long way from our tenure at Janssen Pharmaceutica, and I certainly have followed his progress over the years. He certainly has been a true inspiration to so many people. He just is absolutely incredible in terms of his knowledge, his commitment to really being able to give back and make a difference, and really a purpose in life that certainly is admirable. He's often referred to as the extraordinary professor, and I think that it goes a lot beyond that. I think Professor Matt House is more than extraordinary in terms of what I have seen him produce. As I said, his dedication is certainly unsurpassed as far as I'm concerned in the medical industry. Professor House, delighted to welcome you today to our opening episode of The Wellness Edge. I'm sure you'll agree it's a lovely name for a podcast series, isn't it?
I think it's a great name, John. Thank you. And how good to be part of the first podcast. And I'm going to enjoy speaking to whatever we're going to touch on today. Thank you, John.
Matt, we're going to be chatting about obesity because it seems to have become quite an obsession of late, hasn't it? About losing weight and that sort of things, and which drugs to take. I mean, it's multifactorial. There's so many facets to it. And I can remember in the old days, if you were to lose weight, you would kind of start off by saying maybe in January, when you'd had a particularly interesting festive season with all the foods you'd eaten, and you'd say that you'd cut out bread, you'd cut out bits and pieces, you'd have salads and that sort of thing. But it certainly is very different out there now, isn't it? With so much to take, so much of the availability in terms of drugs and that sort of thing. What is your general feeling in terms of the obsession with obesity?
It's a well-placed obsession. Because, do you know that at the moment, 1 billion people in the world suffer from obesity?
Wow.
Now, what is obesity? There's something called a body mass index, BMI, and you can measure, the spare tire here, or whether there's more fat where it shouldn't be. And a body mass index, you can work it out with your weight and your height. There's a little equation. If it's over 30, you are obese. And if it's over 25, you're overweight. So we know how to measure it, and your GP can do it in the rooms, and it's a very quick exercise, because it's not easy to tell your patient, especially sensitive people, and especially women. It's not easy to tell them you're obese. You need to do something about it. And the predictions are, as I said, 1 billion of the world's population. I think we've got 8 or 10 billion at the moment. That's almost 10%, and I think are obese. And they say in the next 10 years it will be 3 billion. Now, why is that? And what are the problems, John? We need to discuss it. It's not about only how you look. Now, here's a story. I've heard many people say, especially again for women, men handle obesity differently emotionally. It's no different in terms of the morbidity or the problems associated with it, but men handle it differently. Women kind of handle it in their own way, and it's very common for me to hear from ladies. They say, you can never be too rich and you can never be too thin. And that is so incorrect and so bad, because the other end of it, being too thin, is also not good and healthy. It has its own problems. You know about the distorted body image, anorexia nervosa, bulimia, all these conditioned reflexes that are on the other end of the spectrum. But being overweight and being too fat is complex. We know 70% of the overweight population have a genetic background. It sort of it's sort of their tendencies. How often don't you see families, they're all obese? And an obese child that is taught to eat chocolate Pro Nutro at breakfast instead of ordinary Pro Nutro, because these days marketing everything is flavored. And why? Because they want to sell more. So marketing and the food producers are the biggest culprits. And once you start enjoying look, I'm a chocoholic, but I've got to watch myself, because I used to go into Woolworths or Pick and Pay, and I used to buy chocolates by the dozen and have 2 slabs at night, and I felt good. Why did I feel good? Because it's got serotonin, and too much serotonin has got a problem as well. That's another topic. But what happens is that the 70% that are genetically predisposed need a trigger, and that trigger is to start eating high carbohydrate foods, a lot of sugar. What does that do? What are the health benefits, the health problems with becoming obese? And the main problems are as follows. Some of them are mechanical, just tying your shoe. When you've got a stomach like this, you can't tie your own shoes. Have you ever thought of tying your own shoelaces, or not asking your wife to tie your shoe? It's not funny. And you can't do other things either with being obese. And it's terrible flying on aeroplanes. You need 2 seats, not 1. It depends on the extent of it. But the medical problems are as follows. People who are obese have a very high incidence of type 2 diabetes. That means, in medical terms, they're insulin resistant. That means they don't respond to the insulin as other people do, because the insulin impact has got lazy, because the body is a homeostatic mechanism. What is in the blood goes to your brain sends messages out, and things like insulin don't work so much more. So you become type 2 diabetic if you obese. Also, sleep apnea, stopping to breathe while you're sleeping. It's very common, and often is accompanied by your partner snoring. You send them to the spare room, but of course it has a danger to becoming apneic while you're sleeping. Your partner just stops breathing. You think that they're dead. You give them a punch and they start breathing. Obese people have that more than anything else. And obese people have higher blood pressure. They're hypertensive. Obese people have a higher risk of cardiac disease, heart attacks, cholesterol buildup. It's all interrelated. Cholesterol buildup, and then in the end, your kidneys become damaged. So it's a complex disease, this obsession with, and now, what the obsession is, it's the American culture. I want it now. So yes, cutting out bread, your New Year's resolutions, coming back to your question, is all very good, but these days there is a magic bullet, the so-called GMP-1 inhibitors, the injection, the weight-reducing injection. Now we can talk about that as well. I'd like to hear your next questions, but I hope I've explained to you why the marketing, the sugar in food, the food we eat, the lack of exercise these days. Everybody sits for 12 hours in front of their computer and doesn't get off their chair. All contributes to obesity. Our lifestyle is fundamentally flawed. We are not what we used to be. Oh yes, there have been wonderful advances. We fly to the moon, we've got AI, but those things all mean sitting in your chair. Health seems to go out the window, and now we've got the injection. And that injection we can talk about.
When you talk about the surgery that many people opt to undertake elective surgery. I think back to morbid obesity, and I can still remember way back in the days with Ethicon when there was a procedure that was quite popular, a morbid obesity procedure. Do you kind of recall that? But yes. I don't think that's no longer operational, so to speak, is it?
John, you are referring to something we call bariatric surgery.
That's it, yes.
They used to operate on the stomach and take half of it out, and then you got dumping syndrome. It had its problems, but when someone is 400 kilograms or 250 kilograms, before these weight losing drugs and injections came out, it was an act of desperation, and they did those things. They still do it occasionally, because as we will see, these drugs and the injections have their problems. You have to select your patients. They still do it, but it's not as popular or as necessary as it was 30 years ago.
Right. So it goes without saying that obesity, then, in terms of what we've spoken about or what you've spoken about, it's a huge problem, isn't it?
Yes. As a physician, your general practitioner now has an opportunity to say to someone, look, your BMI is 35 or it's 30 or so. We have the opportunity as generalists to, in the rooms, do a glucose
intolerance.
Not a GTT, but to do what we call a random blood glucose and a simple blood test called an HbA1c,
yes,
which looks at your glucose over the last 3 months.
Yes.
And you can do that in primary care setting, and you can do another blood test to see the patient's kidney function, and you can use those tests to gently explain to the patient that it's all kind of coming from their overweight and their type 2 diabetes. But as specialists and as specialist physicians, as cardiologists, as people who specialize in kidney disease, you see the patients much later. You see them after a heart attack. You see them when they are pre-renal failure patients, when they've got protein in the urine. You see them much later. And then, of course, it's quite easy to say, look, your main problem is your obesity. But it's all those people in the workplace that haven't got there yet. Those are the problem people. And today, there's good news and bad news. Everybody is talking. I don't think there's anybody out there that doesn't understand that there's a jab you can get to become thinner. They don't realize necessarily that they're also benefiting their kidneys and their heart and all the other things that come with it. They just want, isn't it funny? They just want to be thinner and be more acceptable and to be, to society. They want to look good in their clothes. But the good news is that it is good news to lose weight. It's a good news when your BMI is below 25. So, as I said again, it's a complex problem. But to tell a child, this is the other problem. Fat children make fat adults. Once the kids expect breakfast cereals all to be laced with chocolate or caramel, they become used to it. And the parents are the problem there. They want little Sarah or Johnny to enjoy their breakfast. And soon, when Johnny and Sarah go to grandma and grandpa for the weekend and they get normal cereal or they get oats porridge and Pro Nutro without chocolate, the child says, I don't like this. So where are you? Children these days, and that's another topic, children rule the world because they rule their parents. And parents are not capable anymore to make judgments that are not popular. So I'm hoping to paint a broader picture of how how difficult this is, but how the reason for the popularity of the topic at the moment.
How does one diagnose type 2 diabetes, Matt?
Yeah, so you start off by seeing if the patient is obese or not, because that's one of the causes. So I've described that. You do a BMI and you weigh them, and so you start there. Then you do the blood test, which I've also covered. You do a random blood fasting glucose. You send the patient to the pathologist, to Lancet or Ampath or whoever there is, or Pathcare, and you send them there for a blood test. Now the blood test is to do their glucose and to do their HbA1c. HbA1c, the value should be below 5.7. That is normal. If it's between 5.7 and 6.5, that patient, it's an orange light. It's a warning, and it says you better attend to your sugar control. Then that patient is given dietary advice. The patient is told to exercise more, all sorts of things. Go on a special diet, high protein and low carbohydrates, reduce your calories, and then to come back for regular follow-ups to see if they're making progress. If they're making progress, good. That means lifestyle modification has worked. And walking, almost everybody can walk. Even if you can't jog or cycle, obviously cycling, anaerobic exercise is good, but aerobic exercise is also good. Then they can maintain their non-diabetic status. And some people are very good at it. Depends on the personality of the patient. If they cannot come out of the pre-diabetes zone, we have to start using drugs. Now, there are 3 classes of drugs, if you want me to speak about them briefly. The old standards were what we call biguanides. That was what even today is used, glucophage, metformin. You add 500 milligrams or 1 gram a day, and that controls the blood glucose in many ways. There are problems. Usually people with diabetes drink a lot of alcohol. Alcohol contributes to being overweight because it's got a lot of calories. But the biguanides, if you drink a lot, you have a risk of getting something called metabolic ketoacidosis. And that is quite a dangerous thing. But in general, metformin is a very good drug. Now, of late, there's another class of drug called SGLT inhibitors. These act by, increasing the liver production of insulin, and they have a different form of action, but they reduce blood glucose as well. A drug for Pfizer, there are quite a few of these category of drugs, and we use them very effectively. And the third category is these so-called, these injections, the GLP-1 inhibitors. They act in a totally different way. They actually produce insulin, but they also reduce gastric emptying time, so you don't feel hungry. And you feel sometimes a little bit bloated. But they excrete a lot of glucose. Well, they don't produce as much because you're eating less. The other category I didn't mention, their main action is by excreting glucose in the kidney. There's a funny story, and I think I'm going to tell it. Much of my life, I was doing research into drugs. And in my company at the time was AstraZeneca, and we worked with Bristol Myers Squibb in 2008 to look for a better drug for type 2 diabetes. And we had two candidate drugs. The one that is now Forxiga, which is I've talked about, the SGLP inhibitor. And the other one we found had a bad side effect. This is 2008. What was the bad side effect? People lost a lot of weight because they were excreting glucose in their kidneys. Their kidneys didn't reabsorb the glucose. So what did AstraZeneca do? We sold that drug to Novo Nordisk, and what did they do? They developed it as the first weight loss. They made billions. So here we were using a side effect of a drug to actually become the main indication. It's not the first time it's happened. There was an antihypertensive drug. People found it grew hair. And that was 20 years ago, the drug that caused you to grow hair. It was actually developed for blood pressure.
It's still available.
I think it is, but it's too late for us, John. We should concentrate on our personalities.
GLP-1 inhibitors, let's focus on those because that's obviously the big talking aspect, and you've spoken about them. We've spoken about diabetes. What is your take on them in general? And what would your advice be to anybody wanting to embark on such a program?
My take on them is very simple. Now, if I'm speaking as a doctor, not as a social media person and not as a fashion fundi, speaking as a doctor, they have their place. They have their place because they're very effective. You give the injection in ascending doses once a week. You go up, Zempic, for instance, 0.25 milligrams, you go up to 5, after a few weeks up to 1, and even sometimes up to 2 milligrams. So you up titrate, and they're very effective. They have their place in resistant people, obese, that can't seem to lose weight, and that who are also in danger of becoming pre-diabetic.
You mentioned lifestyle modification. So this brings into question now, having spoken about the injection, the adverse effects, and the psychology around it, with a lot of people not perhaps understanding the consequences of using this drug on a long-term basis prophylactically. But would you then venture to suggest that, or maybe I can ask the question, is this something that you should take forever, or should you be taking it short term in view of what you've discussed in terms of the complications of stopping with the regime, so to speak?
In my experience, most people that have gone from their current weight to their target weight takes about 6 months, mostly. I need to say, I take these patients very seriously. I monitor them every week. They have to give to me a calendar with their weight on each day. I monitor, I see on weekends when they're splurging and eating too much, and it goes up and it comes down. I up titrate them from, if you're talking about Ozempic again, from 2.5 to 5 to 1. I monitor them very carefully, and then when I decide they're almost at their target weight, I take them down very carefully over 6 to 8 weeks. I found that when you don't do that, it's a disaster. If they just stop, they'll start putting on straight away. But normally it's 6 to 9 months that we can lose 10 to 12 kilograms. Then, your question was, what then? Lifestyle. Then lifestyle management takes over, or something that will help you control calories, carbohydrates. We don't have to go into carbohydrate metabolism and glycemic control, but it's all complicated. The patient must understand their diet, and they must understand what they're doing. And they must walk. I always say, Johnny Walker, keep walking. and they've got to do that lifestyle modification in order to maintain that weight. Now, we're all different. Some people make a decision. It's like giving up smoking, John. It's like drinking less. You know, once you have the second glass of wine, you can have the second bottle as well. You know, as a doctor, when I ask patients, how much do you drink? I just love it when I love it when they say, oh, I have a glass of wine every night. Who has a glass of wine every night? Who? I don't know of any, not even myself. At least 2 glasses.
Possibly explain the metabolic syndrome to us. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a medical word which obesity doesn't happen in isolation. Diabetes doesn't happen in isolation. Kidney disease doesn't happen in isolation. And heart disease and hypertension doesn't. High blood pressure. They're all linked, and that's the metabolic syndrome. It's a patient who's overweight, who's got high blood pressure, and who's got some effect on the cholesterol and the kidneys. It's the whole triad. It's
intertwined.
Well, they got all of them because they all influence each other. So, and this thing that people call the spare tire thing, those people are almost invariably got high blood pressure, and they've got insulin resistance, or what we call type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes. That's the metabolic syndrome. When you come to human behavior, and that is at the root of what we eat and how we look, an overriding concept is when you take something away from any aspect of your life, in this sense carbohydrates and sugars, if you take it, you must replace that hole that you've taken something away, it leaves a gap. And this is part of the lifestyle modification. You have to replace it with something else. Be very careful you don't replace it with something bad. You don't replace it for drinking too much. You don't replace it with drugs and start going on to tranquilizers and stuff, or even mood-enhancing drugs. Replace it with music. Take your mind into something beautiful. Replace the gap of the craving for sugar with walking, with exercise. Replace it with discussions with lovely people. Replace it with writing. Replace it with traveling. But don't think you can remove something and leave a hole that it won't be filled. And beware you fill it with the wrong things.
I absolutely love that, and very philosophical. And the one aspect that you brought up, there's so many interesting aspects to it, but the one is movement, and I think exercise is so important to keep on moving. Professor Matt House, it's been an absolute pleasure engaging with you here today on The Wellness Edge. We've certainly been able to delve into so many aspects regarding obesity, diabetes, kind of touched on the surface, but certainly gone into a lot of depth in many other spheres. And I know we could talk for ages on this particular topic, but it certainly has been an inspiration, and it's been absolutely fantastic listening to you, your viewpoints, and to get an overview of this particular issue, which of course is a burning issue, and an issue that needs a lot of attention, and an area that is a problematical area in many aspects. Thank you very much indeed for your time.